Previously on World History and Geography.
By the 10th century, the Roman Catholic Church had come to dominate religious life in Northern and Western Europe. However, the Church had not won universal approval. Over the centuries, many people criticized its practices. They felt that church leaders were too interested in worldly pursuits, such as gaining wealth and political power. Even though the Church made some reforms during the Middle Ages, people continued to criticize it.
Boo!
Prompted by the actions of one man, that criticism would lead to a rebellion.
And now, our feature presentation.
By 1500, additional forces weakened the Church. The Renaissance emphasis on the secular and the individual challenged church authority. The printing press spread these secular ideas, and some rulers began to challenge the Church's political power. In Germany, well, actually not Germany, because it wasn't Germany yet, because it was divided into many competing states. But in the area of Germany, it was difficult for the Pope or the Emperor to impose central authority. Finally, northern merchants resented paying church taxes to Rome. Spurred by these social, political, and economic forces, a new movement for religious reform began in Germany. It then swept through much of Europe. Critics of the Church claimed that its leaders were corrupt. The popes who ruled during the Renaissance patronized the arts, spent extravagantly on personal pleasure, and fought wars. Pope Alexander VI, for example, admitted that he had fathered several children. Wait, the clergy weren't supposed to get married. Many popes were too busy pursuing worldly affairs to have much time for spiritual duties. The lower clergy had problems as well. Many priests and monks were so poorly educated that they could scarcely read, let alone teach people. Others broke their priestly vows by marrying, and some drank to excess or gambled. Not very good Catholic role models. Influenced by reformers, people had come to expect higher standards of conduct from priests and church leaders. In the late 1300s and early 1400s, John Wycliffe of England and Jan Hus of Bohemia had advanced church reform. They denied that the Pope had the right to worldly power. They also taught that the Bible had more authority than the church leaders did. This upset church leaders, so Jan Hus was burned at the stake, while John Wycliffe was dug up after his death and his bones were burned. Yikes. In the 1500s, Christian humanists like Desiderius Erasmus and Thomas More added their voices to the chorus of criticism.
Boo!
In addition, many Europeans were reading religious works and forming their own opinions about the Church. The atmosphere in Europe was ripe for reform by the early 1500s, starting with Martin Luther. No, he didn't have an action-adventure TV show, although I would watch that. That was more like it. Anyway, Martin Luther's parents wanted him to be a lawyer. Instead, he became a monk and a teacher. From 1512 until his death, he taught scripture at the University of Wittenberg in the German state of Saxony. All he wanted was to be a good Christian, not to lead a religious revolution. In 1517, Luther decided to take a public stand against the actions of a friar named Johann Tetzel. Tetzel was raising money to rebuild St. Peter's Cathedral in Rome. He did this by selling indulgences. An indulgence was like a pardon. It released a sinner from performing the penalty that a priest imposed for sins. Indulgences were not supposed to affect God's right to judge. Unfortunately, Tetzel gave people the impression that by buying indulgences, they could buy their way into heaven. Tetzel also implied that purchasing indulgences could release dead relatives from purgatory. Purgatory was the state a soul would go to when they were not good enough for heaven on the first try, but not bad enough to go to HE double hockey sticks. Luther was troubled by Tetzel's tactics. In response, he wrote 95 theses, or formal statements like bullet points, all attacking the pardon merchants. On October 31st, 1517, hey, I wonder what Halloween costume he was wearing. Anyway, Luther nailed these statements on the door of the castle church in Wittenberg and invited other scholars to debate him. Someone copied Luther's words and took them to a printer. Oh yeah, Gutenberg's printing press. Quickly, Luther's name became known all over Germany. His actions began the Reformation, a movement for religious reform. Oh, I see the word reform. There it is. Anyway, the Reformation led to the founding of Christian churches that did not accept the Pope's authority. Luther believed if it's not in the Bible, then it's not part of Christianity. Luther was astonished at how rapidly his ideas spread and attracted followers. Many people had been unhappy with the church for political and economic reasons. They saw Luther's protests as a way to challenge church authority. Initially, church officials in Rome viewed Luther simply as a rebellious monk who needed to be punished by his superiors. However, as Luther's ideas became more popular, the Pope realized that this monk was a serious threat, which is not a surprise because Luther actually suggested that Christians drive the Pope from the church by force. In 1520, Pope Leo X issued a decree threatening Luther with excommunication unless he took back his statements. In other words, the Pope was going to kick Luther out of the Catholic religion. Luther did not take back a word. Instead, his students at Wittenberg gathered around a bonfire and cheered as they threw the Pope's decree into the flames. Leo excommunicated Luther for heresy. Hey, did you know that Pope Leo X was a Medici Pope? This means that he was one of the 4 popes who was a descendant of the famous Renaissance patron Cosimo de' Medici. Now you know. Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, a devout Catholic, also opposed Luther's teachings. Charles controlled a vast empire, including the German states. He summoned Luther to the town of Worms in 1521 to stand trial. Told to recant, or take back his statements, Luther refused. So Charles issued an imperial order, the Edict of Worms. It declared Luther an outlaw and heretic. According to this edict, no one in the empire was to give Luther food or shelter. All his books were to be burned. However, Prince Frederick the Wise of Saxony disobeyed the emperor. Wow, Prince Frederick looks like a mix between Henry VIII and Martin Luther. Anyway, for almost a year after the trial, Prince Frederick sheltered Luther in one of his castles. While there, Luther translated the New Testament into German. According to the Catholic Church, the Bible was supposed to be only in Latin, but Luther wanted common people to read and understand it, not just the clergy. Luther returned to Wittenberg in 1522. There he discovered that many of his ideas were already being put into practice. Instead of continuing to seek reforms in the Catholic Church, Luther and his followers had become a separate religious group called Lutherans. I wonder how they came up with that name. Oh, yeah, of course. Many northern German princes supported Lutheranism. While some princes genuinely shared Luther's beliefs, others liked Luther's ideas for selfish reasons. They saw his teachings as a good excuse to seize church property and to assert their independence from Charles V. In 1529, German princes who remained loyal to the Pope agreed to join forces against Luther's ideas. Those princes who supported Luther signed a protest against that agreement. Those protesting princes came to be known as Protestants. Protestants. The term Protestant was applied to Christians who belonged to non-Catholic churches, protesting the practices of the Catholic Church.
For I am a Protestant.
Still determined that his subjects should remain Catholic, Charles V went to war with the Protestant princes. Even though he defeated them in 1547, he failed to force them back into the Catholic Church. In 1555, Charles, weary of fighting, ordered all German princes, both Protestant and Catholic, to assemble in the city of Augsburg. There the princes agreed, cuius regem eius religio.
Cuius regio eius religio.
Thanks, that sounded much better. And it means, who rules, his religion. As a result, each ruler would decide the religion of his state. This famous religious settlement was known as the Peace of Augsburg. The Catholic Church soon faced another great challenge to its authority, this time in England. Unlike Luther, the man who broke England's ties to the Roman Catholic Church did so for political and personal reasons, not religious reasons. But first, let's take a break.
Cuius regio eius religio.